So what we'd like you to do, just an intro on what's going on, like 3 minutes, and then we'll take questions.
Well, you know, the opportunity that was going to exist before the Senate decided to move on this next bill was for you to have an opportunity to hear what was coming out of the Senate on the education policy side, and kind of what's happening in the House, and how we're coordinating those efforts. So as you just heard, the school grading bill just passed off the Senate floor. The school grading bill in the House received a hearing. It did not get brought up for a vote in committee. You're hearing a mutual consent bill right now as they're discussing that bill. That bill never received a hearing in the House. The only I'm going to say true reform bill that was heard in the House, a couple of them, were the third grade reading bill, which also they just passed off the Senate floor. That also did not come out of appropriations. It did receive a hearing in the House Education Committee, but got stopped in the Appropriations Committee. That also will be coming out of the Senate. The academic acceleration bill will be coming out of the Senate. It did get polled in rules yesterday. It's an Eric Pettigrew bill, and it will be hopefully debated on the House floor, but I highly doubt it. So anyway, that's just the difference of what's going on in the Senate as far as education policy and what we're doing in the House to try to support the Senate and the majority coalition and trying to move things as quickly as possible to get some true outcomes. And our coordinated effort has been all around students and student outcomes. With McCleary, we realized that it wants to drive more money into the system. We want a different system that's producing outcomes and not just more money into the same system.
Can you characterize what kinds of bills are moving from the majority in the House, if they're not?
Yeah, right. So the majority party in the House has moved some equal opportunity, cultural competency bills, some suicide prevention bills, some, you know, and really, truly, the sad part about it, as we as Republicans see it, is like third grade reading really targets our minority population. We have not been doing any favors by promoting students who are unable to read after third grade, because as we know, after third grade, they're reading to learn. So for every year that they're promoted is another year lost. And the statistics show that 1 in 4 students are minority students that drop out because of not the ability of not being able to grasp reading concepts by the 4th grade at the end of 3rd grade. So instead of really providing solutions for that, for our minorities, then we're just coming in later and saying, okay, this is what we need to do at the high school level, when we really could have intervened a lot earlier.
I think that I'm not mischaracterizing the WEA in a tweet calling these bills bad bills that are moving off the Senate floor today. What does that say about, I guess, the disconnect, at least between the Republicans' education agenda and the state's teachers union, if they're actually, I think
right.
that's the word
well,
they use.
As you know, I mean, the WEA is all about the adults in the system. They don't care about student outcomes. They care about their financial ability to stay in their jobs without any accountability and receive more money. It's not about making sure that our students receive the best teacher in front of them, that our students deserve that. And that's what we're about. We're about the kids in the system, not the adults.
So also with us today is Judy-Warnick. She's doing the capital budget.
Good
morning, afternoon. This is, I don't remember, the 4th year I think I've done the capital budget, something like that. And this is a better year. We have about $1.8 billion in capacity for our the bond capacity. 2 years ago we didn't. We were unsure we would even have a capital budget. So this year we have $1.8 billion. However, we've got $3.4 billion in requests just from the state agencies. So we're starting the discussions. Representative Dunshee and I have been through Governor Gregoire's budget to look and see what we can prioritize, where we can go with her proposed budget, because we have not as yet seen one from Governor Inslee. Word is that there will be one. There will be some priorities put out later this month, so we'll have an idea of what he would like to see. But right now we're using Governor Gregoire's budget. Talking about education, we have a bill on Friday that has come over from the Senate, an early action education funding bill that not only funds the schools that have passed their bonds, but some safety measures. And not sure what's going to happen with that bill when we have the hearing in the House, but we're willing to take a good look at it. And the capital budget is usually one of the last bills to pass, and because it takes a while to get all the priorities right, all the features right. I also am on the Ag Committee, and we have a lot of water bills going through the Ag Committee. The capital budget will be touching the water bills in several ways this year. The Chehalis Basin funding, continuing funding that. The Columbia River, Office of the Columbia River, continuation of funding that. And then the largest one that we're looking at is the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan that would help provide funding to do water projects from the top of the Kittitas Valley all the way down through Yakima and into Benton. So it's those are large projects that we need to be looking at, but they are priority for Central Washington. Go ahead.
When you were talking about schools, you mentioned safety measures. So what safety measures are you talking about?
Well, there were some safety measures in the bill that is coming across, putting security buttons in each classroom, looking at doors and other measures that we could have a quicker response from law enforcement if there is an incident in any of our schools.
So like there's a panic button section, there's also a lockdown button. So the principal could lock down the school from his office. There's also the ability for the teacher to communicate to the outside world from within her classroom after it's been locked down. Those kind of technology advancements.
That's technology that exists here in the Capitol, right?
It is.
It is. It is. So if we can do it here, we should do it.
So I learned about a panic button one time. There is one. I was like, what's this do? Oh.
Voila.
Voila.
Yeah, yeah.
Would your attitude be, though, if lawmakers can have them, then...
Oh, no. And we're for it, and we think it's a good thing. We're still not convinced as a caucus that locking children into a classroom is necessarily the best strategy. When you talk, we have one of our members that was a survivor of Columbine, and he was told to hunker down in the cafeteria with the other students. And when you look at it from his perspective, the children that were moving out of the building were the ones that were unharmed. And in that building there were, how many bombs? A lot of bombs in the building. And if they had actually gotten detonated, all the kids that were locked down would have been in jeopardy. So we're still having that debate to whether we lock children down or if we put them mobile. The police would like them in a secure location, and right now that's where we're going.
And years ago there was a shooting in Washington State right next to where my office is in Moses Lake. And that was a student that walked in to his classroom and opened fire. So a panic button would have saved some heartache there, because the incident was stopped by a teacher who, at his risk to his life, confronted the gunman. But so I can see the need for those panic buttons as well. So
we'll see how it moves forward with the Democrats.
You know, I just want to follow up. You know, you ask about some contrasting bills, and I'm sitting here thinking, this is a prime example of a bill and the way that Democrats and Republicans see things differently. Chris Reichdahl has a bill that just got pulled out of rules. That is called the GRUB bill. It's a pilot project program in his school district here in Olympia that pays students a stipend, a $1,200 stipend to stay in school under the pretense of dropout prevention. I mean, at what point do we think that's okay to pay students to stay in school? I mean, maybe some kids stay in school because they love high school football. Should we pay students a $1,200 stipend through the summer to practice football to stay in school? I mean, these are the kind of things that we need to be very, very cautious of as we move bills like this through. You know, these kind of programs are just, they're receiving credit and taxpayer dollars to stay in school. Is that the right way? I don't think so.
So questions?
Yeah, let me switch subjects with a question for you, Representative DeBolt. Early this morning, House had a hearing on repealing the death penalty. What do you think of the chances for that of passing out of committee, the chances of that of passing the House?
It's not moving. We were understanding that was a hearing. It's beyond the cutoff. It's you know, I hope they hold the same rules though to the governor's bill on climate change as they look at these different bills that they're hearing after cutoff. That one's, we were told, is not going to move because of the process of the House. But we also heard another bill, you know, yesterday with the governor on his climate change bill. That was dropped and introduced after cutoff also, but my understanding is that one might move.
Their contention, those supporters' contention, is that the death penalty has been quite costly to our state. What do you think of that argument? What do you think of continuing the death penalty?
So right now we haven't had a full debate on it in our caucus, and I have personal feelings on the death penalty, but right now that's not relevant. And so if the bill's not moving, it's one that we probably aren't going to have a lot of time and energy spent on it, because there's so many bills moving. It's important to track the ones that are.
Yeah. But as you say, the bill could end up moving.
It would be unlikely to see that bill move because it's after cutoff, and so I would say it won't. But if it does, I'd be happy to sit down with you once I've read it, because I haven't even read it. Oh, are you on judiciary?
No.
Are you on judiciary? Okay. So no.
Can't help you.
Sorry. We can get you somebody to talk about it if you want.
I appreciate your thoughts.
Okay.
I have a lobbyist-related question for starting doing, but maybe you can humor me a little bit. Do you see a difference? Could you help people outside this building understand, within the lobbying ranks in court, there are people like Nick Federici,
yes,
Slack, you can probably hear sitting in here, and who's, you know, or Lonnie Jones-Brown lobbying on behalf of social services, human services. And we'll see rallies out here on the steps all session long, you know, for groups that want something in the budget, for instance. And then there are the Steve Gainos of the world, the business lobbyists who, until recently, he didn't draw attention to himself, but then he did his famous beer pour in Ways and Means. But who tend to work behind the scenes more. Can you just offer some insight into the styles, the different approaches, what value you get, especially out of the business lobbyists, in terms of learning about issues?
So I have a couple thoughts. One is I find it ironic that some of the highest paid lobbyists in Olympia work on behalf of poverty. I think that the industry of poverty in Washington State is fascinating to me. You know, the way our caucus looks at lobbying is we kind of view ourselves as those people who represent the taxpayers, and there are no lobbyists here for the taxpayers. So no matter who you look at and who our goal as a caucus over the years has been to say, what about our constituents and the taxpayers first? So I have some heartache when we actually use government funds, and that goes to an agency that then hires a lobbyist with our own government dollars to come and lobby to get more government dollars away from the taxpayer for that. The big special interest is tough. You know, as a business lobbyist or any lobbyist comes to your office, the most important thing they do for you is they bring you the pros and cons. And if you have a lobbyist that comes to you and doesn't give you the pros and cons, who only tells you one side, they don't have a long life around here. And then you have certain lobbyists that work one caucus more than another, and they're noted for that, and that's part of the issue there. Lobbyists are probably, in my opinion, they're integral to the process from asking questions and getting a perspective, but you have to remember it's a paid perspective. And so you have to do your own research, you have to come up with your own opinion, and then you have to be open and honest, transparent with the lobbyists when you don't support them. and their ideas.
And the lobbyists have to be careful. I've always used them for ideas, for suggestions, if they're meeting, you know, representing a certain group. But a week ago, I was lied to by a lobbyist, and so he won't come back into my office because I took a bad vote because of that lie. And so the only thing you have around here is your reputation when you're a lobbyist, no matter how much money you make.
Yep.
But he just really shot his reputation with me because he wanted to be able to pass so badly and told me some inaccurate information. So.
Can you reveal what persuasions?
No, I'm not going to go there. But I just, yeah, he just flat out told me something that wasn't true. So.
Just lastly on that, do you have any concern, should the public have any concern about, they do call the lobbyists for the third house. Mm-hmm. You're also a citizen legislature. Do you think that lobbyists have access to the code advisor? They can actually draft legislation, draft amendments. Do you worry at all that they have too much power?
So I never call them the third house. They're not elected by the people. They're not a branch of government. I'm probably different than a lot of people. Our caucus is really, you know, when you look at our world, we have more small businesses that are represented in our caucus. We have a lot of people that we view, our job is to represent the people in our districts. And so having them draft bills, I'm not a big fan of. Calling them third house, I'm not a big fan of. They do play a role. I understand that role. You got to have information sources about issues here. And so when they do carry those information sources, that's fine. But do I view them as part of the body? No. If not, we should elect lobbyists.
Thanks for letting me hog the floor.
Anything else? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What is the status of the House Republican caucus's amendments to the transportation budget?
So we will have a full release for everybody tomorrow. It will be out in press release form. It has all of our reforms. I think there's 6 reforms with probably 6 under reforms and a bunch of bills underneath it that are all prepared and dropped. I think that, to be honest with you, from what we've seen in the transportation world right now, the lack of ability to provide any clarity to the failed projects and what's happening in Washington and the voters' lack of trust, I think that these measures are no longer reforms. They're necessary in order for us to build the trust for Washington again if we're ever going to get anywhere.
What we saw the poll come out. I mean, what are you seeing now in the prospects of passing any sort of transportation?
I think the transportation poll was interesting, but like our caucus was opposed to it much before the poll because we know that Washington State Department of Transportation isn't efficient and effective and voters aren't necessarily trusting us. I think that with the simple majority, though, you're going to see the Democrats move that 10-cent gas tax anyways. So they don't need 2/3. They don't need to send it to the voters. They can do it here. I would see the Senate coalition stopping it. That's just my 2 cents if I'm a betting man. Can't speak for them. I don't know. But if they run the package that they have currently in front of them, no one seems to support that. And they might do it anyways because that's, you know, what they do.
And just could you imagine the House Republicans supporting a funding package if it was married with some of the reforms you're talking about, or is this just not the year for funding?
So yes and no. The idea of yes is once these reforms are put into place and we see resolution to them, then I think we'll support something because then we can go to the voters and say, okay, we've done all these measures. Here's the yield, which I think will be some sense on a gas tax. So it would actually lower the ask. And then we would. So it would take a couple years before we can get to that point. So it wouldn't be a this year thing, but we do think that if you can accomplish these goals and you can prove that Washington is ready and you can manage the flow of traffic through GMA or whatever, you can build bridges that don't sink, you can not overbond capacity, you can build maintenance cycles, you can do all these things, then we can go back and say to the voters, okay, we've fixed it, it's a well-working, machine, now maybe we need to ask for more money.
This is kind of like your son earning trust to borrow the car?
Yes, sir. That would work.
And that's exactly the kind of message I heard this morning with my Chamber of Commerce and my local producers, farm producers. We have I-90 running through our district. We need that to be open 24/7, 365, to get produce and goods. And that's the same message that they passed on to me. Make sure we fix it before we spend more.
On 520, will there be insistence on specific legislative hearings talking specifically about the 520 bridge plan?
Yeah, I just got the file on the pontoons and what went wrong with them and how under-engineered they were, what the stress points are. I think it's something that the legislature probably needs to have a workshop on to figure what went wrong and how our system broke down, why we chose to engineer it in-house versus going out-of-house, why we accepted the liability on it, and who valued that liability when we asked them for benchmarks. We did not get any back, and who's responsible. And so I think before you put more money into an epic failure, you need to kind of understand why you had this catastrophic failure. Anything else? Oh, yes, sir.
So just a lot of the questions are kind of all over the map.
Yeah, it's a good day. I like those.
So you guys, you talked about really taking a proactive approach to education, not approaching these students later in their educational career, trying to sort of nip academic problems in the bud. You also talked about school violence, and I'm just wondering, where's the proactive approach on gun control? We've heard about this, Friday before last, we saw the blocking through procedural games of 5 bills in the Senate Public Safety Committee on gun control, some of which had relatively broad support. Is there going to be any kind of a proactive approach to gun control that we're going to see out of the Senate this year?
So first, you made an assumption when you asked your question. You talked about blocking through games. If it had broad support, it would have passed the Senate floor. It's clearly a tight majority. So if it
had broad support,
it would have passed the Senate floor. If there were votes for it, it would have passed. It didn't have votes, so it didn't pass. I can't speak for what their plans on it are. I would tell you in the House, when we set out on this, we set out with 3 goals. One is to understand the mental health aspects of the people that maybe are prone to violence and how we can better help the schools identify them, because right now counselors and teachers are not considered, don't have the ability to be able to say dangerous person. You have to go through an outside process, so they can't protect their students through their own common sense and what they've seen. So we have to do that. Second is right now a youth can be caught illegally with a pistol 5 times with a concealed weapon, 5 times before we prosecute. We'd like to lower that down. I think the compromise is now 2 times. It's still too much for me, but okay, 2 times. And then that was agreed to. And then we look at, there's a myriad of other bills about local control, this and that haven't been agreed to, and they're working on it. We don't know what the end result or the outcome of this is going to be. We thought we were going to be able to work bipartisanly on a package and a solution on that, but this thing became uber partisan very quickly.
Well, that's what was so interesting, was at least one of those bills had Tom and other people on it, had broad support of the 23 sponsors. And that's what was so interesting to me, was I think it was a shocker that quite a few people that died there. It wasn't given a hearing.
Broad support, though, in the Senate, my understanding, is 26. I mean, 23 is just like us. When we put 43 votes on a bill, that's broad support from our perspective. We represent 49% of the state or 46% of the state. That's pretty broad support, is it not? But that's not good enough to pass a bill in the House that deals with education or the capital budget or some of the bills that we saw die that would help put Washington to work again. So you have to have the votes in order to get the bill from it. If you don't have the votes, you can whine all day. It doesn't matter. You don't have the votes. So I can say that through procedural games and manipulation, the House isn't hearing our minority bills. Or I can say, okay, I don't have the votes and I need to fix that in order to be able to move those. So it's just the context, I guess. Anything else? I appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you.
You would House